All these years later, and my parents are indoctrinating me in video game addiction. Yeah, I said parents. Thank you for both buying me the Time Magazine Super Mario Bros. 40th Anniversary Edition separately. It honestly was a pretty amazing gift to get twice. My dad just got back from Kentucky, and he's like, Pete, look what I found. Time Magazine Super Mario Bros. And then for my birthday a few weeks ago, my mom got me that. I think she also saw it on store shelves. And I've talked about them on streams before, ironically, while playing video games, and many people have said how awesome my parents are. And yeah, they're the ones that got me into video games. And growing up, they were playing Donkey Kong, Pac-Man, Miss Pac-Man in arcades. I remember watching my dad beat Star Tropics. He beat Star Fox. And then my mom is the one that got me Yoshi's Island, Donkey Kong Country 2, talk about becoming pretty well versed in some great games early on, thanks to them. But also, my step parents, Alan and Michelle, they're also great too. I enjoy conversations with all of them just in general, and I think they've played a big part in just me living a good, happy life. And I think that's a big part of what it's all about, trying to make your best in the world each day and find things to enjoy. And it's cool that we can talk to others about artistic endeavors. They talk about video games being an art form, and yeah, I mentioned Donkey Kong Country 2, Yoshi's Island. There's many other games, like Mario 64, The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask. Those are all great pieces of art. The other two Donkey Kong Country games on Super Nintendo, anything called Donkey Kong Country, right? And it's fun that you can, share those perspectives and hear the perspectives of others to learn more about the world in this awesome art form that is video games. So, and one thing that's interesting is my first I Love Mondays was about reaching this threshold of a 10-year mark. Last summer, we hit the 10-year mark of Mario Kart 8, Shovel Knight, and Resonance by Home, which it basically, because all three of those things were happening, I was like, I want to talk about this. And there was a lot of things I've already been wanting to talk about. That's why this exists. It's not just because of what I used to have, what as a community, us and a lot of Super Smash Brothers and Street Fighter players had at the shop called Pew Pew Card and Game, where every Monday we would get together and play Project M and sometimes Melee, and people would usually always play Street Fighter up there. And so that feeling of like, oh yeah, it's Monday, like I loved that. And my good friend Michael Torres, Ramen Noodles, really helped invoke that. Like, I remember us talking about how much having something eventful like that on Monday made a huge impact on that day. And it also linked up with, like I said, about I learned, especially in high school, to try to cherish each day rather than just, oh, it's hump day on Wednesday, oh, finally the weekend, I can be happy. Not that I really did that, but I think there's an easy default to fall into, where you're constantly waiting for Friday. And so I wanted to bring about the celebration of these things last summer, the 10-year mark. And another 10-year mark we're hitting this summer that it's honestly, it keeps hitting me out of nowhere, is for my Pokemon format, Highlander. And what that means to me is, my ambition to making that format almost 10 years ago was, I felt like in the black and white era of Pokemon, they severely dropped the ball. Their game design, I've talked about this, but their game design went to super simplified. That's the I'm trying to think of a fancy way to say it, but to be honest, super simplified is the way it is. And again, this is never to diminish the results of players, But in terms of the foundation of game design, we went from Pokemon that had 3 option slots to the standard of Pokemon now having 2 again, or to the point that Pokemon was pushing for the rare legendary Pokemon that were easy to play because they were just 1 card. You didn't have to evolve them like Machop, Machoke, Machamp. Now you could just play Reshiram and do his effectiveness for 120 damage pretty easily. And in terms of they talked about power creep, the damage and HP numbers went up drastically. Like it was night and day, to the point that they did a mid-season rotation, which has never been heard of in the history of that game, and I think in any big card game. And I mean, it really was just showing how drastic Black and White was. Ironically, yeah, with that name, it really was polarizing. And so I used that ambition to make my own format, which took the design philosophy of 2010 and Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum, and I wanted to dial it up to 11. I was like, man, we could make every Pokemon be fundamentally strong and pretty well-rounded. And also we can respect the history of those Pokemon. So as the 10-year mark comes around, I've been thinking about the 3 original players that helped test my game, which is Vance Kelly, PJ Wallace, and Ryan Green. We've been traveling to tournaments for many years, and as we've all gotten older, we obviously haven't been traveling as much, except obviously Vance, good on him. Yeah, he's been traveling a lot, and I adore his ambition. I think that is admirable. It is something to look at in terms of like a good competitive ambition. It's just, yeah, in general, I think as time goes on, you have jobs and stuff, and more things that might be added to your life. You might have less time. That being said, you can dedicate that time to traveling and competing if you want to. But naturally, we just, as a group, we just travel less. And then, the pandemic made a huge difference. And I think that was the big reset for a lot of things in terms of traveling. They had to halt tournaments, rightfully so. So with those group of players, they still every now and then will play. And I want to talk about Ryan Green specifically today, because Ryan, in my opinion, has always, I've known him since middle school. Me, Ryan, and Vance actually went all to the same Pokemon League growing up. And Ryan, I think, has always been one of the strongest Pokemon players in Kansas City, and I always thought he was one of the strongest in the Midwest. Of course, him, Vance, and PJ. And I'm not even trying to be biased because they're all some of my closest friends, but I've watched them play. I've watched how they handle things in matchups and how they try to adapt accordingly, and they're all well skilled, to the point that when they all show up for a Highlander tournament, like a monthly, other players are like, oh man, yeah, in a nice way, but they're pretty good players. And Ryan Green, I think Michael Torres, the another good friend I mentioned earlier, he said it best. Michael's been getting into Pokemon through Highlander, and he says that when he plays against Ryan Green, it's like the second Michael plays a card and Ryan reads it, Michael's like, oh gosh. Yeah. Like Michael says, he watches Ryan read a card he might not know at the time, and then Ryan's already doing like crazy calculus in his head and adjusting accordingly on how to take that Pokemon down, or how to win, or how to win. And that form of observational execution is something that I think needs to be talked about more. And Ryan, another props to him is that he has been competing in Highlander tournaments almost every month when he can make it. Like, he is a genuinely amazing friend, and he's not going to talk about himself. He's a good, humble guy. I will tell you that Ryan is extremely intelligent, and me, him, and a few other friends, including Michael Torres, will get together and play board games every now and then. And you'll hand him a brand new board game, and you can just watch him like analyze like the board itself and start realizing how to win the game pretty fast. And I think observational execution is such a good skill to have for anyone. Like, it's just a good skill because, we talk about, eyes on the road, but that is a form of observational execution. There's a reason why people say don't text and drive. It is idiotic. And, another reason to do that is because there's so many things that could be heading your way and could be ending your life pretty fast. Keep your eyes on the road, which is a form of observational execution, because, you never know when someone might do a drunk sideline or they're swerving back and forth. You don't know when someone's going to run a red light, and you hope that you have enough time to react accordingly. And the fact that you can bring that skill, that life-saving skill, to a lot of other things, hobbies, you can bring it to work. You can, when we talk about not just like business negotiations, but work negotiations, observational execution is huge. Negotiations is honestly like playing a game of poker with that person. Now, you don't want to, obviously there are people that are good, kind-hearted, but you don't want to see it as like, oh, when I'm negotiating with someone, they're my enemy. This isn't Casino Royale, Hopefully not. It can be. Regardless, having observational execution skills is big. Things like body language and understanding what does the person at this negotiation want? What do I have? What do I bring to the table? Right? Another thing about observational execution is, I play a lot of fighting games. I play a lot of PvP. And some people rage quit when they don't want to feel like they're transparent. Some people are so scared of being read that rather than being admitted to being grabbed by Zangief 3 times in a row, they'd rather just leave the game. There's that kind of like fragile ego that's really kicking in, or should we say being shattered. And they aren't willing to use their own observational execution paired with humility as a virtue, good old T-Hawk, and being able to pick themselves back up and adapt accordingly. The fun part about PvP is there's often a time limit. You got to keep things rolling, especially when there's a schedule and tournament. So in a fighting game, when there's a time limit at the top, having that skill to observe your opponent and then execute accordingly within the window of that time limit is huge. It's a big part about why chess pushes timers as well. And I think it's just important. There are certain competitive Pokemon formats that they don't require a timer. And what I've witnessed at times is if you don't require a timer, these are more of custom formats. When they don't require a timer, there are players that take full advantage of that. They will take a long time to check every single possible scenario, quote unquote, and it could take minutes between turns. Thankfully, there are some, as far as I've seen, the formats that do that, they do allow a player to say we're using a timer. And that's what I always do. I think it's important to play within the confines of a time limit as you play in other tournament formats because, again, observational execution is a big skill, and it's something I love to practice. And again, it's not just to save your life in a car, but being able to use observational execution skills will just help you throughout life in general. And back to Ryan Green, I look forward to what deck he brings every month. Because when he doesn't have a time limit, he's looking at the card pool and he's deciding what he wants to play. And then he comes to a tournament and other players surprise him. But instead of him giving up, he often looks at the board and he's like, okay. And I watch his body language and he'll keep his composure. Like, there's so many scenarios he'll keep his composure and he's thinking, okay, this is my out, right? And I've done coverage of him recently doing stuff like this where he'll have something promoted against him and then he figures out this is my out, and he has to be crafty about it because if his out gets taken out, he might lose. But it's that type of tenacity to not give up and to swing your momentum in your favor potentially by looking for an opening. That's huge. It's good for any competitive player, whether it's golf against other players' scores, adapting to the wind outside at the golf course, playing, tennis in a 1v1, recognizing that your opponent likes to spike a lot, so you might try to condition them outside of that and then hit the ball past their head. Now that's a Mario Tennis strat, but I'm, 1 for 1, right? Maybe not as many giant hammers, but, there's a lot of factors you can do with having that type of competitive tenacity, the observational execution to adjust accordingly. And I think when you're rooted with, again, humility as a virtue, to pick yourself back up after you lose, there's no failure in that. The fact that you're willing to keep at it in life, the fact that you're willing to learn from your mistakes, and the fact that you are taking note of how someone beat you, and you're ready to keep at it for the next time, and the next time, and the next time, nice. That's awesome, and that's a good life worth living for. I love Mondays.